فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة يتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. وقال تعالى فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون. صدق الله العظيم. Dear respected brothers, elders and friends, we don't want to make this into too formal of a speech. Don't worry, inshallah. And I don't want to take too much of your time. I know Sir wants to also give a speech, and it's a very important topic, the life of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So we want to keep this talk inshallah organized. We want to keep it as much as possible, no more than 30-35 minutes. And I want to try to keep every section of this talk maximum 5 minutes. And we want to try to understand the topic very carefully that we are studying today. And the topic is the importance of following a madhab. Firstly, in the first 5 minutes or so, if I just want to take 5 minutes, I want to explain something here, which is this topic can end up becoming a bit sensitive for certain people. This topic can end up becoming a tool for people to use as a means of attacking certain groups. It's very important before we even start this discussion that we rectify our intention. Why are we sitting here? Why are we studying about what is a madhab? How does a madhab work? What's this whole topic about? Firstly, we are not sitting here so that we can learn some ammunition or we can learn some details that we can use to attack other people. That is very important. We won't be doing that anyway, but inshallah it's very important that we learn that, because sometimes these topics can become sensitive. What we are here for is to understand this great legacy of our ulama, to understand what our ulama did for us and why it's important to stick to a madhab and how that will very much protect your deen. And without taking further time on this topic, remember the Quran mentions shaytan yanzaghu bainakum. The shaytan is looking to create division within us. There's a genocide happening on the other side of the world. It's very important when we discuss topics like this, we don't touch upon them with the means of attacking a certain group or certain people. We just study what we need to study. We need to understand why we study Sharia the way we study it. Whatever anyone else wants to do, we let them do what they want to do. But we must understand why we follow a madhab. And for us, it may be the Hanafi madhab. For certain people, it may be the Shafi'i madhab. For certain people, it may be the Hanbali madhab. And for certain people, it may be the Maliki madhab. How did these madhab come about? What happened? And what is the madhab and why should we follow it? So, I want to discuss with you, inshallah ta'ala, about 5 to 6 topics. And we're going to divide them into subtopics. The first topic is the Quran and Sunnah. The Quran and Sunnah, is it black and white? Is it clear cut on every issue? That's the first topic. The first topic, let me repeat it. You know, in South Africa when we were studying, we had a little seminar where they taught us how to give a speech. I still can't give a good speech yet, but they told us that at the start of the speech you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then at the end you tell them what you told them. But I'm not sure if I'll be able to fulfill that. But let's see. In the first 5 minutes we want to try to spend, we've done 5 minutes, we want to spend the next 5 minutes inshallah speaking about, is the Quran and Sunnah black and white? Today people say let's follow the Quran and Sunnah. Is it black and white? Is it explicit on every rule? Number 1. Number 2, what is fiqh? You hear that word all the time. What does it mean? Number 3, the importance of consistency in fiqh. Consistency. Number 4, the issue of following your desires. What is that? What do we mean when we say following of one's desires? Number 5, we'll come to the main topic, which is what is a madhab. And number 6, we want to touch upon very briefly how we came to where we are. Why are we having to hold a program of this nature? Do we ever have in the history of Islam? We didn't do Allah about it. But to the best of my readings, I've not come across in a biography of a scholar that he had to hold a program on the importance of following the madhab. It says that he used to hold madaris, so he used to hold durus on this topic of why we should follow. He never had to hold durus like this. So how did we get to where we are? So let's start off with the first topic. The first topic was, have we already forgotten the first one? Is the Quran and Sunnah, all the Quran and Sunnah, all the black and white? Does it cover every single issue? This is a very common question. People ask, if the Quran and Sunnah are just 2 sources, how did we end up with so many madhahib, 4 madhahib? If it's just Quran and Sunnah, why can't we just go back to the Quran and Sunnah? It's very simple. This is a misconception. The reason why it's a misconception that can happen to anyone. Anybody who is not studied, it can happen to them. Why? Because we believe in Allah and His Messenger. We believe that the Quran has come from Allah, and we believe that Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has delivered to us the Sunnah. These are two divine sources. Yes? Divine means it is impeccable, you cannot question it, there's no shak, there's no doubt within it. Yes? So we now think because it's divine, that means it must cover everything. Explicitly it must cover everything. But what we forget to mention and what we forget to understand is it does not contradict the divinity of the Quran and Sunnah. It does not contradict it. The fact that the Quran has a limited set of ayat. Doesn't the Quran end after don't we have a khatam of the Quran? So the Quran has a limited set of ayat. Okay. So that's understood. Because I hold the Mus'haf, does it carry on forever? No, it stops at one point. Okay, if I pick up a book of hadith, let's just say I take all of the ahadith of them. Muhaddithun have disagreements over how many ahadith we have. We all agree Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was a human being, yes? And we have an agreement that he passed away. إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُ مَيِّتٌ. So even though the message he delivered was divine, we all agree that what he said was finite. It ends at a certain amount. Muhaddithun disagree amongst themselves. They say 8,000 ahadith, some say the max, everyone agrees in terms of text, the amount of ahadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, it's around 8,000. Maybe a bit more you can push it. The rest is all different chains of narrations for that same hadith. Okay, so we've got set number of ahadith, set number of Quranic ayat. Is that okay? Can this now, think about this logically, can these set number of ayat and set number of ahadith cover every single topic in human life? Can it explicitly do that? So when we open the ahadith, will we have what dua we should read when we sit in our car explicitly, sayyara? Will we have in our Quranic explicit mention of AI, that how to deal with AI? And will we have explicit mention in the ahadith of how to deal with it? How do we deal with this? We say the Quran and Sunnah are the forever sources that you need until the day of Qiyamah, but they are finite in the sense that the number that we have for them, it ends at a certain point. So the only way we can apply the rulings of the Quran and Sunnah for all of our situations is through our understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, and to infer from them. And this is an agreement between all the scholars, that although the Quran is protected in terms of its text is protected, there can be a difference of opinion over meanings of the Quran. There can be a difference of opinion over the meaning of the Quran. And you know that when you open a book of tafsir, what will we have? One opinion says this, another opinion says this, another opinion says this. So we've got differences of opinion because we refer to this as dilala. The inference that you understand from the Quran is what we refer to as the one meaning. There can be ikhtilaf over it. There can be a difference of opinion over what is understood from this hadith. And it's that difference of opinion that has essentially caused all of these different madhab. And that can happen today. If I told everyone a simple instruction right now, it happens in Darul Ulum all the time. Those people who study in Darul, the Ilam will make all students come downstairs. Some students might think, no, it doesn't refer to us. It's only talking about the fourth year students. Everyone has a different understanding of what they meant by everyone needs to come downstairs. Oh, I don't think he's talking about the under 16s. I think he's only talking about the over 16s. I think that's what the announcement is. In the same way, the hadith will come. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah will say, no, this was specific to the Prophet. Imam Malik might come in, this is a general ruling for everyone. So there can be differences of opinion over how we understand the hadith and how we understand the Quran. Abu Shama al-Maqdisi, a very great scholar, he says, نصوص القرآن والسنة تحتمل وجوها من التعويل وطرق العربية ومجاريها واسعة فلكل قول منها دليل. He says that the explanations of the Quran and Sunnah, he says تحتمل وجوها من التعويل. You have many different interpretations. The Quran and Sunnah are open to interpretation, and it depends on who's the one who's interpreting. If you're going to be doing it, you're the interpreter. And if we are going to allow the early scholars to do it, they are the interpreters. But it's going to need interpretation, because the Quran is not explicitly telling us how to deal with AI. The Quran is not explicitly telling us to deal with everyday situations that we're getting that are not explicitly mentioned. So who's going to do that interpretation for us? It's going to be you. It's going to be someone before you. Someone's going to have to do it. Otherwise, the Quran and Sunnah is no longer applicable for our lives anymore. فَلِكُلِّ قَوْلٍ مِنْهَا دَلِيلٍ. Everybody will have an evidence. Today, the modernist will come. He will say, even someone who holds the most absurd view, not even a part of Sharia, he will say, but the Quran says this, the Hadith says this. Everybody has an evidence. Everybody is doing what I call interpretation. Everyone's understanding something from the Quran and Sunnah. I'll give you a very simple example to understand. Nabi Sallallahu says in the Hadith of Jami' al-Tirmidhi, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. None of you will believe until I am more beloved to you than min walidihi, than his father, than his son, and والناس أجمعين, and all people. Now you tell me, can we take the literal meaning of this hadith? None of you will believe. That's what the Prophet said. He never said none of you will truly believe. He said none of you will believe. That would mean Allah protect none of us are believers now. Who here can say that they love the Prophet more than their own daughter, their own son, their own child? Is it possible for everyone to say that easily? Very difficult. So then the scholars had to come and say, this is not concept. Interpretation of that. They said, well, hold on, we're going to have to say, لا يؤمن يعني إيمانا كاملا. What's that? Did the Prophet say that? We have to interpret it because it doesn't make any sense. So we cannot escape interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah. No one can escape it. No Sunnah. The next time someone comes and says that the Quran and Sunnah says this, the best way to respond is the way that Imam al-Tahawi responds. What does Imam al-Tahawi say? He says, لا ينبغي لأحد أن يأتي إلى خبر قد احتمل تأويلات فيعطفه على أحدهما بلا دليل يدله على ذلك من كتاب أو سنة أو إجماع ثم يزعم أن من خالف ذلك مخالف لما روي عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then he carries on, he says, بل ما خالف إلا تأويل مخالفه لحديث رسول. He says, next time he's talking, and in his book he's speaking from the Hanafi method. And he's not speaking with the groups that we, even I may have to deal with. He's dealing with he's dealing with the Shafi'is. And it's a very cordial, this idea that the Madhab hating each other, astaghfirullah. The Madhab have so much respect for one another. We consider all of them to be part of the Ahlul Sunnah. They have nothing but respect for our Shafi'is or the Maliki's. It's a way of thinking about the Quran and Sunnah. So he says, and he's speaking to the Shafi'is, he says, you have mixed up the contradicting of the Quran and Sunnah with contradicting of your understanding of the Quran. So next time someone says to us, but your madhab contradicts what the Prophet says, we can just respond by saying, is it contradicting what the Prophet says or your understanding of what the Prophet says? And that's really just the answer. Not to mention, at times the Prophet ﷺ will mention different things at different times. How are you going to combine between all of them? How are you going to combine between all of them? This happens in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعَنَهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. Whoever murders a person, he will live in hellfire forever. Yes? Then in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about those people who have committed sins, and then he says, and then amongst them, those who have committed murder. After that he says, إِلَّا مَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ وَعَمِلَ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. Except those who receive forgiveness. And you see the first verse seems to indicate you will never be forgiven. And that is actually the view of a group of scholars. The second verse seems to indicate that if you do tawbah, you will be forgiven. How are we going to reconcile? Same way, the Prophet ﷺ will at times say certain things, he will say another thing. So who speaks for the Quran and Sunnah is very much the point that we are trying to make here. So who speaks? Who's going to do that interpretation? And that's where we come to the second point. What is fiqh? Fiqh is the deep understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. So we've now explained the first point, which is, are the Quran and Sunnah black and white? No. The Quran and Sunnah, what they are? Yes. What they mean? It's very much open for interpretation. It can be abused as well, yes, 100%. And that's why that already now is a prelude to why we follow the Madhab, by the way. It keeps our understanding in line with the way the Salaf understood it. And the Madhab is very much the understanding of our early scholars. So what is fiqh? Fiqh is the deep understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. So when we say we follow a madhab, we are following a fiqh, we are following an understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. I'll give you a good example of how fiqh is not just knowing something, it's understanding it. When Shu'aib alayhi salam, his people said to him, قَالُوا يَا شُعَيْبُ مَا نَفْقَهُ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا تَقُولُ. Let me ask you a question. Was he speaking Chinese to them? Was he speaking to them a completely unknown language to them? They said to him, O Shu'aib, we do not have the fiqh of what you are saying. Was he speaking to them any absurd language that they had never heard of? He was speaking to them their own language. But what they were trying to say is, مَا نَفْقَهُ, it doesn't make sense to us. We don't understand it. It's not that we don't know it. What does this tell us? My main point with this topic, because I'm conscious of the time, I want to cover the other topics. The main point is, you can know something, but not have the full understanding of it. Has anyone seen that video of that little kid? He'll be sitting there, and then there's big sheikh, and he'll be testing him on all the ahadith. And then he'll on the go, finish this hadith in one go. He knows the full Bukhari, he knows the full Muslim, Does that mean now he's the most knowledgeable person and he's now a faqih? Does he have a good understanding of everything? No. It does not necessarily mean that by knowing something, you understand it properly. That's why Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, and this hadith is in Jami' al-Tirmidhi, فَرُبَّ مُبَلَّغٍ أَوْ عَامٍ سَامِعٍ. At times you can pass on a hadith to someone, and he, even though he's hearing it for the first time, he'll understand this hadith better than you do. I'll give you a simple example of this. Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah, who is one of the imams in our madhab, he was once with Imam al-A'mash. This is an authentic story. It's, there's a chain of narration for it. The chain of narration is authentic as well. It seems to have happened with al-A'mash and Abu Hanifa, and al-A'mash and Abu Yusuf. It seems to have happened with both. Wallahu alam, both stories are authentic. It could have been that it happened with both, or there was some confusion. Wallahu, but it's definitely happened with someone. One of our imams, this has happened with, right? Wallahu alam. So al-A'mash, he asks Imam Abu Yusuf a question that, this masla, what's the answer to it? Imam Abu Yusuf says, this is the answer. How did you know the answer so quickly? He said, because of a hadith that you narrated to me. I only learned this hadith because you told me about it. It's the hadith. So Imam Abu Yusuf narrates the hadith to him. So he says, I knew this hadith before you were even born. But I never thought so deep about the hadith that I managed to come up with the answer to this question using this hadith. I always knew about the hadith, but I couldn't think deep about it. So then he makes a pivotal statement. He says, Ya ma'shar al-fuqaha, antum al-atibba wa nahnu al-sayadila. He says, all fuqaha, all scholars, all those who have a deep understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, you are like the doctors and we are like the pharmacists. We're giving you the medicine, and you're the ones who are actually prescribing it. You know what to do with the medicine. So you can get a pharmacist, you know every medicine. But then would you go to your pharmacist to diagnose yourself for a... No. He knows the medicine, he knows what to give you if you tell him the problem. He can't diagnose the problem. That the doctor will have. In the same way, the faqih, the understanding, the scholar who has the fiqh of the Quran and Sunnah, he is the one who will be able to understand the deeper meanings of the Quran. So sometimes people say, well, now we have computer program. It tells us every hadith that's out there. That computer program will not have the understanding that the early scholars had. That's the important part. There's many stories about this, but I'm conscious of time and I want to cover all the subject. I'll just mention one story. Everybody has heard of the name of Shah Waliullah in the Hadith al-Dahlawi. Very famous scholar. Those of us who are ulama, all of our chain of narrations for the Indian subcontinent will go through Shah Waliullah. It's mentioned about him, and this is mentioned in a number of books, that when he was studying under Abu Tahir al-Kurdi, Abu Tahir al-Kurdi was the one who gave him all of the chains of narrations for the books of Hadith. So he taught him Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, all the Kutub al-Sittah he essentially got. As he was teaching him, they would be discussing things. After the discussion, after Shah Waliullah, when he said this, at one point he said to one of his students, I would give him the hadith, and you know what? He gave me the understanding of the hadith. He told me what was behind the hadith. He had a deep understanding of how, if a person spends a lot of time with a certain individual, he knows what he likes, what he doesn't like. In the same way, these fuqaha spent many hours and days with this, and months and years with the Quran and Sunnah. And therefore, the Quran and Sunnah, they understood the deeper understanding behind it, the maqasid of Sharia. Everybody agrees. There's some difference of opinion over who can speak on behalf of Sharia. Everyone agrees that it's a mujtahid. Someone who has a deep understanding. What are the requirements of a mujtahid? Oh, big ikhtilaf. Everyone says, one person says this. Everyone agrees on one requirement. You must have understood the maqasid of Sharia, a deep understanding of the objectives of Sharia. So today, if a person tries to interpret the Sharia, he says, oh, but the Quran says this. The first thing we have to ask him is, what understanding of the deep objectives of the Quran and Sunnah do you have? What qualifications do you have? So that's fiqh, the deeper understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. The third point, we won't need to spend too much time on it because it'll just take one example and you'll understand it, inshallah. So I want you to think of the Quran and Sunnah at the top. Quran, Sunnah, and even Ijma, very important. I won't put Qiyas because it will confuse a few people. But you've got Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma. Ijma is consensus of the Muslims. Then you've got the law. You've got the Sharia law. For example, Salah is fard, Zakah is fard, Hajj is fard. How did we go from the Quran and Sunnah and Ijma to this final ruling? For example, what will be the final ruling of AI? Question mark. Someone's going to have to do that job. What's that process that takes us from the Quran, Sunnah and Ijma to the final ruling? The understanding of these three sources is what will take us to the final ruling. But the rulings, they have to be consistent. The rulings have to be consistent. You can't be super lenient in, I'll give you a simple example of this. Someone out there may right now have parked on a double yellow light. If you were to get in trouble, you would get a fine. If the law said that he would get a whatever, say £60 fine, I'm just making it up, let's say, I don't exactly know, or £40, £50, whatever it is. He got that fine. Tomorrow he assaults someone physically, and he only gets a £10 fine. Would we say that there's a problem with the law at this point? The double yellow line was a potential to cause harm. You could have harmed someone, you're going to cause some difficulty. The second one, when he actually attacked someone, he actually did cause harm. Why did his punishment decrease when he actually committed a worse crime? So we need consistency in the law. So it's not just like, no, I look at the Quran and I'll deep understand, I'll think about it for like my whole life and then I'll come up. You need to come up with the entire law. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a lawmaker. He didn't just come as a pious person to improve our lives, he came as all of that as well. He came as a lawmaker. He's literally, sometimes we view as our president, prime minister as very intense people, they know how to, very bureaucratic. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was the greatest lawmaker. He was the most intelligent person. His law is the most consistent. And a good example of why we don't like consistency in law, I'll give you a very simple example. Obviously, I don't want to say too controversial things, but if you look at the Israel-Palestine issue, we could say that that is one example of where we find inconsistency in the law. We look at the law, it says this, but it's not being applied. The law seems to be changing here, but here the law is not applied properly. So inconsistency in fiqh, in Sharia law, is inconsistency in general, in life. Nobody likes it. It's considered a form of oppression. If you're inconsistent, you're oppressing. And that is why the law that the mujtahid, the fuqaha have to come up with has to be consistent. There needs to be consistency in the law. So we've covered 3 points. The Quran and Sunnah are not black and white. They are definite, 100%. We know this is a Quranic ayat. We know these are ahadith, 100%. What do they mean? Their deeper meanings, their inferences, their understanding? It's not black and white. There can be differences of opinion on that. Number 2, how do we determine that? How do we determine the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah and Ijma? Fiqh. Applying our mind, and not just my mind and your mind, but the mind of the mujtahid. Who's the mujtahid? Who's the person who has that deep understanding of the Quran and Sunnah? Someone who has understood the maqasid of nubuwwah. Someone who has understood the purpose and objective of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's whole law. He has a bird's eye view of the whole thing. If you, for example, and I've given this example just now, if you have a servant and a master, a person who spends so much time with his master, after a little while, after 20, 30 years, you could bring a perfume to that servant and say, do you think your master will like this? And he'll sniff. I don't think he'll like it. I know him very well. No, trust me, he'll like it. Try it, show it to him. He won't like it, trust me. Shows it to him. Why? How did that servant know that? he understood his master from top to bottom. In the same way, these mujtahideen had studied the Quran and Sunnah from top to bottom. They had a bird's eye view of the whole Sharia law. And their law, the third point, and the third discussion we had was consistency. They were consistent in their law. The next point, which is number 4, and inshallah we're on target, so I want to stop at 25 as much as possible. Covered 3 points. We want to keep these 3 points in our minds. The 4th point is the issue of one following their desires. Let's go back to that scenario wherein we say, I want to apply the Quran and Sunnah myself. Why do I need to follow this Hanafi madhab? I'll do it myself. Okay. What you are going to do at one point is, you're going to come up with a ruling. Oh, you're going to realize, this ayah could be understood in like 5 different ways. This hadith could be understood in like 2 or 3 different ways. At one point you will be very sincere, mashallah, at the start. What's going to happen at some point? You're going to fall prey to your actual desire. It's natural. Everybody tries to start off something. It's something that's a bit risky. People tell me don't do it. At the start he's very sincere. Over time he falls prey to his desires. And that's the same thing that's going to happen here. And why is that dangerous? Deen is easy, isn't it? Like, we are allowed to follow our desires. Why not? Is that not a problem? Don't we eat and drink and sleep and all of these things? These are all part of our desires. What's wrong with that? The issue is that the entire purpose of Sharia is to contradict our desires. And what you will end up doing without realizing is you will make the Sharia follow your desires. You've turned the whole objective upside down. Imam al-Shatibi rahimahullah says that when a person comes to ask a mufti a question, what is he saying to it? What is he saying in real terms? What is he saying? Come on, we're in a Western world. We don't need to go to a mufti. We can go to the court and the court will give you a ruling however you want. But why does that person go to the mufti? Why does he ask a question? That fatwa is not binding. He doesn't even need to follow it. Why does he go? He's essentially saying to him, أخرجني عن هواي. Take me out of my desire. وَدُلَّنِي عَلَى اتِّبَاعِ الْحَقِّ. And show me what my Allah has said. I don't want to follow my desire. What I want is I want to take his company. I want to take his land. But take me out of that. Show me what Allah wants. So he's telling you, take me out of it. And that's why they say that the Mufti now tells this person, choose whatever you want. He's essentially telling him, go back to your desire. And the whole purpose of Sharia is to contradict your desire. أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Do you not see the one who takes his desire as his Lord? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again and again. وَلَوْ اتَّبَعَ الْحَقُّ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ لَفَسَدَتِ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. If the Sharia were to follow their desires, the entire world would be in destruction. Let me ask you a question. When you might say, I don't fully understand that. What do you mean contradictory? When you wake up for Fajr, mashallah, some people, pious people might be, I enjoy it. I wake up straight away. How many people find it super easy? And how many people like me, this is a struggle. Wake up. Oh, the doctor has slept. What are you doing there? You're breaking your desire to sleep because Allah has told you to come to the masjid. Allah has told you to wake up. So the whole purpose of Sharia was to contradict your desire. But because of all those points I mentioned earlier, the Quran and Sunnah is not black and white, it's open to interpretation, and therefore you need to have an understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, which is the fiqh, and therefore you need to apply fiqh. And if you don't have a proper understanding of the maqasid, the objectives of Sharia, what will you end up doing? You will end up following your desire. So you will use the Sharia itself. It's the worst form of following your desires, because the person who follows his desires knowing well that I am doing something wrong, he will repent one day. But the person who's using Sharia itself to contradict and to follow his desires, he will never repent, because he feels like, I'm following Sharia. Deep down, only him and Allah know that, are you really following Sharia, or are you following your desire? So the madhab, following this consistent set of laws, that was the third point we mentioned, remember, consistency. The madhab has all of the Sharia laws set out for us. They've done the hard work for us. They've done the understanding of the Quran, Sunnah and Ijma. They were geniuses when they did it. They had a deep understanding of the Quran, Sunnah and Ijma and the message of Nubuwwah. So they did all the hard work for us. And now essentially what we are doing is, we are saying all of that hard work, and this Sharia law is consistent. And remember, if you have inconsistency in the law, it's considered a form of oppression. You notice it in this day and age. The government, what's happening in the House of Parliament? When they discuss in the debating issues, they are debating consistency. the opposition party is saying to the Labour government, you're not consistent in this. You said you'd do this, you said you'd give winter payments and stuff, fuel payments, but you never did it. You never followed it. What do you mean? You're not consistent. You say you care for the people, but you don't. So consistency in law, everybody aims for it. And therefore, you, with your own understanding, if you're going to interpret the Quran and Sunnah, you don't have the capability, you don't have that deep understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, you're going to make two mistakes. You're going to end up following your desire, and you're going to have a very inconsistent law. And Sheikh Abdul Fattah al-Ghudda and others, they speak about this, that in Egypt at one point as well, they tried to do this. They tried to go back to the Quran and Sunnah, and they tried to just extract the rulings. And after a while they had to stop, because the law they were coming up with, in the masail of like women's issues, they were super lenient, and in another masala they're super strict. And everyone's thinking, well, why is this? Why you on this side you say this, don't be super strict on this, and here you're so lenient. So you end up with a very inconsistent Sharia. And now coming to the last 2 points now, and I want to end by the way in the next 5 minutes. So what is a madhab? That was point number 5. What is a madhab? And I think inshallah we've already answered this to some degree, but just to cover it up. We said a madhab is essentially the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah as understood by these 4 imams. Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But is it just that? Is it just the understanding of these 4 and that's it? And then that's it, everyone just kind of copied them. There's an author, and he's a very talented writer. He's from USA. His name is Sherman Jackson. Sounds like a non-Muslim, but he's a Muslim. He's a very talented scholar, inshallah. He turns this as he says this is a form of scaffolding that took place. He says, Imam Abu, and this is agreed upon even in academia, the madhab actually doesn't start with Imam Abu Hanifa. There was no madhab at that point. Imam Abu Hanifa didn't come say, oh, everyone follow me. No. His views were accepted, amended, worked on. Imam Yusuf comes, Imam Muhammad comes. After that you have the likes of Imam Abu Sulaiman al-Juzjani and Imam Abu Hafs al-Kabir and so many great Hanafis that came in that 200 to 300 Hijri. They say the madhab actually became a proper madhab about 321 Hijri at the hands of Imam al-Qarqi, some say others. But that's when the proper borders were made. That this is the overall view and understanding. We've now got the full package. So Imam Abu Hanifa is like a builder. He's building the building. Then scaffolding is done. He's laid the foundation, so to speak. A sort of understanding of the Quran and Sunnah based upon some principles he's understood. Deeper understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, he lays the foundation. The next group comes, builds upon that. It's called the scaffolding. The next group comes, builds upon that. We are going to have to build upon what all of them have done, and we are going to have masail like AI. They say AI is actually going to reach its true potential in 2050. Right? Farasa will inform me of that. And he's doing a PhD on AI. So it's going to reach the true potential in 2050. So we're building on the Hanafi madhab. Yes, we may have to take from the other madhab at times, but we won't just be jumping for no reason. There'll be principles. When a person says, I can just go back essentially to the Quran and Sunnah, what he's saying is, all this building, forget it, I'll build it again from the bottom. This is what he's saying. And what he won't realize is that at some point he will also have to build on others, because he can't do it himself. How much can one man do? This is a generation of scholars. So how do I want us to understand the madhab? This is the last 2-3 minutes, I want to finish with this inshallah. How do we want to understand the madhab? It's the understanding of a generation of scholars, or generations, plural. The understanding of generations of scholars of the Quran and Sunnah in one paradigm. You've got the Hanafi paradigm, you've got the Maliki paradigm, you've got the Hanbali paradigm, you've got the Shafi'i paradigm. And these 4 paradigms, it was the will of Allah that these 4 became dominant. Initially there were other understandings as well, but these 4 became very dominant, and that is the 4 dominant understandings of the Quran and Sunnah. And the final point, in the last 2-3 minutes, I'm going to end with this, inshallah. So we've done, let me just, because you have to tell them what you've told them so far. So we started off with all the Quran and Sunnah black and white. There are multiple understandings of the Quran and Sunnah. They are finite in terms of number, and it is the only way we can apply it to our situation and our day-to-day life, and the only way it can be applicable until the day of Qiyamah. It's got finite number of ahadith, finite means you can count it and it ends at a certain point. You've got finite number of ahadith and Quranic ayat. How are you going to apply it for all the masail that are going to come until the day of Qiyamah? The only way is you're going to have to understand something from them. And there can be differences in understanding. So that was point one. The Quran and Sunnah are not black and white. How many times have you seen this on? I just saw it 2 days ago. Someone said, follow the Quran and Sunnah. Don't follow your desires and blind madhab following. The truth is, he's saying follow the Quran and Sunnah, but what he's saying is follow my understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. Because there is no definitive person who can say this is what the Quran and Sunnah, because it's not black and white. There can be multiple interpretations. So whose interpretation are we going to follow? The interpretation of that pious, pure generation who were the closest to Prophet ﷺ. And sometimes they say no, as understood by the Sahaba. But the truth is these madhahib incorporated the madhahib of the Sahaba. They incorporated. Do you think Abu Hanifa was just jumping into a TARDIS and going back to the time of the Prophet? How do you think he reached the Prophet? Through the Sahaba, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, etc. All of these people, he had asanid and understandings of their teaching. So that was the first point. The second point is, what is fiqh? We understood that is an understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. And it requires the maqasid al-sharia. You need to understand what the Prophet said. The third was in the consistency in fiqh. The consistency in the final produce that you make, your sharia law that you made using fiqh, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', fiqh, understanding is fiqh basically, is what produces sharia law. Sharia law must be consistent. Everyone loves consistency. Nobody likes an inconsistent person. We hate that guy. Number 3, issue of following. Number 4, the issue of following the desires. Number 5 was what is the madhab. And the last final point is how did we get to where we are? How do we have this situation where we have to explain all of this? Some of this stuff was so basic, inshallah, let Sham could understand all of this, inshallah. How do you get to where we are? There's a book, and I want to give reference to 2 books. There's a book by a scholar. He's from the US, but he's very talented. His name is Imad Hamdi. He's got a book, it's in English, and you can access, you can read it, Salafism and Traditionalism. There's another book, again, I don't agree with everything he writes, just to be clear, but there's a scholar by the name of Jonathan Brown. He's got a book called Hadith, Muhammad's Legacy in the Modern and Medieval World. In chapter 10 he discusses this, and they draw the link. What happened in 1492 was a very important event. Does anyone know what happened in 1492 or around the 1490s? You see, up until the 14th or 15th century, as we call that, the 15th century, yes, Europe was in a place of darkness, yes? Europe was in a state of darkness in the sense that all of the great inventions, etc., was all happening in the eastern side of the world. How did western side become very prominent? We have a very Eurocentric history. We always study history about Battle of Hastings. Battle of Hastings was irrelevant. It was such a small event in the history of this world. Major Alexander the Great, when he came from Egypt, does he go up or does he go more into Persia? Into Persia, right? The 2 greatest empires, Persia and the Roman Empire, yes, they were there in Europe as well, but their main focus was they were more obsessed with Persia and they were obsessed with India and all of these places, and India, including Pakistan, Bangladesh. This whole area was more important in the history of our world. It's only in 1492 where an important voyage takes place. Christopher Columbus travels from Spain, and the actual objective, the historians mentioned, was to meet the Khan of India, or that whole area, to raise an army against the Muslims, the Saracens at that time. But he ended up, so he thought he was going to India, ended up meeting America. And then they robbed all of the money there, they brought that back to Europe. Long story short, it leads to what we call a Renaissance, it leads to the Enlightenment period, wherein you could see the European thinkers came across so much money, so much, you could say, education, and they came across what we refer to as the Greco-Roman tradition. Because around that time, remember, just before about 1453 is when Constantinople falls. The Byzantine Empire comes to an end. Where do you think those Byzantine scholars, Christian scholars, went? Ran back into Europe. So, what they brought with them was the Greco-Roman tradition, writings of Aristotle, writings of Plato, all of these people. And these people are all Christians, these European areas. And they were like essentially in a period of darkness. They were just following their clergy, Christian clergy. They were doing taqleed. Yes? When they came across this writing, suddenly now it leads to new ideas. Liberalism is born. Democracy in a new way is born. Secularism slowly comes across us sometimes. But the main idea I want to focus on is liberalism. We have something which we refer to as the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation is a guy who is essentially saying, long story short, Martin Luther, he's saying, stop following the ulama, the Christian ulama, go back to the Bible. And scholars have now drawn a direct link between the development of that movement and when Islamic countries were colonized, the Muslim world was colonized, Egypt, India. These are the two places essentially where we notice the same ideas, go back to the Quran, go back to the Sunnah. That is what will help us now. Stop following these ulama, they've misguided us. So similarly the Europeans felt like we've become free by going back to just the Bible or having these liberalist ideas. Let me decide, individually, I should make my own choices, you can't tell me what to do. That's the same idea that we have nowadays, and that's why we have to go through one step. Inshallah ta'ala, you can read more about that in other kitab. I've already taken a bit over as well, so jazakumullah khairan for the opportunity, and inshallah ta'ala.